Okay, so let's talk about the 2 through 5 seeds in the East for a bit. The Celtics have a 4-game lead. Hopefully this isn't me jinxing them, but I mainly want to talk about the Bucks, Sixers, Nets, and Cavs right now. For what it's worth, the Knicks, they're within shouting distance of Cleveland for number 5. They're 3 games behind them. But yeah, it's really close between 2 through 5 with a difference of basically 1 game within them. I'll start with the Sixers. So, the Harden Embiid pick and roll has been what seems like their bread and butter for a minute now, and it has led to a lot of Embiid free throw line jumpers because typically he'll screen and then sort of float down to the free throw line, and a lot of the time teams are dropping on that because they don't just want to give him something easy at the rim, and that's the obvious counter to that defense, right? And then, of course, you're going to get your Harden, who has been sprinkling in more mid range this season, or just him getting a head of steam towards the rim, kicking it to whoever, with Maxey being the best candidate for catching it and then going to the rim himself as opposed to a catch and shoot. This is all pretty basic stuff, right? And then you're also going to get your Harden ISOs, your Embiid face-ups, and it's been pretty damn successful. And weirdly enough, I think Harden has been somehow underrated this season. I mean, he's averaging 21, 11, and 6 on 61 true shooting. And then on the other side of the floor, I think the heart of this team's defense is Embiid in drop. And then for actions not involving Joel, they do get a bit more switchy, but sometimes they'll just fight around screens as opposed to doing the immediate switch. Melton improves the perimeter defense. I remember at the beginning of the season, their transition defense, especially in one game against the Raptors, was pretty rough, and their just general communication on that side of the floor was not good. And then they cleaned up some stuff, climbed to 4th in defensive rating. Some of that with Melton playing more, some of that with Embiid just being Embiid. I mean, it's been the story of his career. When he's in the game, the defense is way better. And so as we look to the second half of the season for Philly, I'm just thinking the transition defense and the defensive rebounding around Joel, they just matter so much for these guys. The last thing to make note of is that Doc has been putting in a real effort towards having a Harden, Melton, and Maxey on the floor at the same time. I mean, they've played 109 minutes together in the last 10 games overall for this team. And if you can hold up defensively with that, then offensively speaking, that just becomes really, really tough to guard because at that point you've got the most ball handling that you can put on the floor around those two with Melton, Maxey, and then Tobias. Next we go on to the Bucks, who have had a bit of a weird time recently. So Giannis has missed a couple, Drew missed a few in their recent games, but pretty much the loss of Chris Middleton has really been starting to affect them. Their offense, even if they scored like 130 points against the Raptors without Giannis last night, their offense is now 22nd in the league overall. And I mean, look, we know what the Middleton-Giannis two-man game did. It led them to a championship because it carried their half-court offense, right? But even with that, it was sometimes still a bit of a process where there would be times of, there could be more motion here. Oh, the spacing isn't ideal here. Or, why is a blah shooter the closest guy to Giannis when he's in the post or whatever? AKA easier for the defense to load up on him, that sort of thing. And without the Middleton, Giannis two-man actions, it's just been tough for him. And I mean, there's another conversation to be had about like how much movement really is there between Grayson Allen, Pat Connaughton, and general like corner actions for Drew as opposed to just simple screens up top. Like, okay, you can have a conversation there too, but the big thing is Middleton. And I mean, he recently had a stint in the G League, mostly so he could practice. So it doesn't seem like he's super far away from playing, but yeah, they need him. To be optimistic for a second, Joe Ingles had a pretty big game against the Raptors where he was looking just nimble enough off the dribble, I will say that. He also had a cool play where he kind of screened for Drew and then got it back and found Pat Connaughton in the 1 second that Connaughton was open. So that was nice. So yeah, that's the Bucks. As a Celtics fan, I am still terrified of the Bucks. I don't really care what their record is. As for their defense, so technically they've been like slightly worse in their last like 10-15 games on that side of the floor. I'm choosing to not be concerned about that at all. Now let's go on to Cleveland. I want to talk about Evan Mobley's offense for a little bit because I feel like there has been a little bit of that. Wait, why didn't this second-year player become an all-star thing? It's like, I think that's a little too aggressive when talking about player development and all that. But anyway, for Mobley, listen, man, there's plays where he'll just bring the ball up court after a rebound. I mean, he's got plays where he'll cross over into DeAndre Ayton, put his shoulder into him, and then hit like a turnaround hook shot or whatever on him. He had a pull-up jumper against Jock Landale as well as a turnaround jumper over Jock Landale in that game. A play against the Wolves where he brings it up court and he hits Rudy Gobert with a little bit of a in-and-out dribble, I guess, and then makes a shot over him. When teams are not guarding him, he is not all the time, but a lot of the time able to beat them with a cut. I still think it's really interesting how they space Mobley and Allen, where typically it's like if Allen is setting a screen on one side of the floor, Mobley's in the opposite dunker spot, that sort of thing. Mobley will also cut sometimes at the same time as Allen is screening, which the risk there is that it gets a little too cramped in the paint, but it could also lead to times where like Donovan Mitchell's guy has to help for the sake of not giving up something easy, and then it's Garland to Mitchell for a relatively open three. And as for the defense, well, let me just tell you this. When Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley are in the game, they've got a defensive rating of 104, which would be a good number even like 10 years ago, let alone today where offenses are just becoming overpowered. And of course, you've got the Garland Mitchell just working off of screens with those two, the pull-up shooting and all that, but teams are also able to play off of Okoro, and sometimes when Mobley is on the three-point line, it gets a little easier to provide help around the basket and all that, and look, Cleveland's able to get by. They're a good team, but they're in the rumors for a wing who can shoot, and it's not surprising because, I mean, just look at the shooters on this team. Outside of Garland and Mitchell, it's pretty much Dean Wade, Chetty Osman, and Karis LeVert, and, all three of those guys are fine. I mean, Dean Wade shoots 40%, not on a super high volume, but okay. I should say he's also missed a lot of time. But as far as getting that extra shooting, I mean, of course, they moved a whole bunch of picks for Mitchell, which, hey, that's fine. That's the type of move you got to do. But when you want to then make the small moves after it, it gets a little tougher. And now we go to the Nets, who do not have Kevin Durant for some amount of time here. Kyrie just missed their last game. They've lost like 3 in a row currently. Look, man, with how insane of a turnaround they had off of Nick Claxton, who I think he's like 3rd place in Defensive Player of the Year on NBA.com right now, which, like, yeah, his switching and his rim protection and all that has been legit this season. KD's help defense, Ben Simmons and his just switchiness everywhere. The transformation on defense was crazy. This is going to sound really basic, but it's the truth. They're just going to have to survive with KD out. TJ Warren's been getting buckets. He had 19 in their last one, 20 against the Celtics. A whole lot of free throw line or slightly within the free throw line jump shots for TJ, whether it's coming off of a screen and then putting his back into somebody for a turnaround or just a little floater or whatever. Simple stuff, but hey, TJ Warren, professional scorer, so that's them. And, the other thing with the Nets that's interesting, there was that John Collins, I don't know if rumor would be the word, but there was something with that like a month ago or whatever. I do think they could use a big forward who can fit into their switching defense and then just give them a little bit more size. I don't really think they've got the stuff to get somebody like a John Collins, so there might have to be just a more niche option for him out there. Also, if they end up getting the Sixers in the playoffs, they could probably just use more size for that alone. But yeah, that's the East, and the thing is, man, is that the 4-5 matchup is most likely going to be 2 of these teams, so the round 1 in the East is going to be pretty wild, and just not getting the 4 or the 5 is going to be, like, pretty decently important.